that's a different thing. But what I'm saying is, we're now at a time where we're educating people into a world where not only will robots take away the jobs of brawn, as they traditionally have, but they're now starting to take the jobs of brain. And that is more challenging for all of us to think about. Now, let's see if I can move this on it. Oh, here we go. So then, this is probably very familiar to you, but a friend of mine, Linda Grattan, some time ago, she wrote a book called The Shift, and she talked there about levels of skill in the economy, low, medium, and high levels of skill, and plots where the jobs are, and then shows what is then happening thanks to technology and globalization, where those medium-level skills are being taken away, and was one of the first people to talk about the hollowing out of the labor market. And that's one of the other things that we have to think about when we're thinking about what we're educating people for. And then now I'm in the commercial world, I'm also thinking about the way business is working. So I grabbed these screenshots in my preparation for coming over here. There's some great places to stay here in Trondheim on Airbnb. Seemed reasonable prices to me. £39, I don't know, £29. My conversion into kroner is really poor, so I apologize, I have absolutely no idea what that is in real money. But you can find somewhere nice to stay. You have a good car sharing scheme here in Trondheim. Now these are examples of new ways of doing business. A few years ago, if you looked at the hotel industry around the world and said, let's say 5 years ago, if you said a new player is going to come into the hotel industry who is going to dwarf Hilton. The Hilton hotel chain, we're in almost 100 countries, employing over 100,000 people, huge amount of real estate. They'd have laughed at you. They'd have said no one would be able to afford to buy all those hotels, to train all those people, to make it all happen. It's just not realistic. And then someone comes along and develops Airbnb and is now in pretty much every country in the world, massively dwarfs Hilton, has way more bed stays every night than any hotel chain in the world, and has done that. And has done that on the back of a handful of employees. Zipcar was the first car-sharing business, founded by a woman called Robin Chase in Boston. And she said, why are all these cars spending 90% of their lives on the drive? What a massive waste of resources. There must be a way of sharing car resources so that it's more efficient, and so that we can all save a bit of money, and so there's less congestion on the streets of Boston where she lived. And she came up with this platform that navigated all of that for people, and Zipcar and car sharing was born. And that, to a large extent, is where the Trondheim Bilkollektiv might come from, where you can rent a car by the hour. Now, these are really successful new models of platform businesses, but they don't employ very many people. And when I look at the way people like to do business in this new economy, come on, you will. They like to do business here. You know, if I have 5% stake in a health tech business, a mobile health tech business that's diagnosing malaria using iPhones. We're most likely to do our meetings in coffee shops. We're most likely to interview staff in coffee shops. It's a fairly hipstery culture. But this is not the environment when I went to school that I thought I was being educated into. When I went to school, the unwritten promise No one actually wrote it down in a contract for me, but it said, you work hard at school, do well in your exams, you'll get to a good university, get a reasonable degree, you'll have a career for life. And with your career for life, you'll be able to afford to buy your own house, pay off the mortgage in 25 years, have a final salary pension scheme, bring up your kids in security and comfort, and retire at the age of around 60 in considerable comfort. That was the deal. I didn't work that hard, but I went to a good university. I'm now on my 4th career. I'm lucky I still have a final salary pension scheme. I'm one of the very few left in my country that does. The contract is over. My kids choose to live in London because they think that's where the work is, but they have no hope in their minds of owning their own home, let alone a pension. And that's then the other half of this challenge that I am wanting to labour for you. Come on. Yeah. Oh, come back. So then we need to go back to that notion that I said of children being born today living to 105. And what does that mean? There's some of the demographic data that I got from Statistics Norway about this country and the projected average life expectancy. So remember what I said was that there's more than 50% chance of living to 105. So that doesn't mean that the average will be 105, but there will be a fair number of people that you're educating today who will finish work at the turn of the century. Now, it's impossible for us to imagine what life will be like for them at the turn of the century. But it's really important to think about the fact that that is the future we're educating them for. And Linda Grattan, the friend I alluded to earlier, is publishing at the end of this month, The 100-Year Life, where she's starting to think with Andrew Scott, a professor from Oxford, very seriously about the implications of this, where we will end the 3-stage life that the 20th century made us very comfortable with. We will end the notion that we have 3 phases of education, work, retirement. Just doesn't seem credible in a working life of 60 to 70 years that we would do that. For a start, it seems bonkers that we would front-load our education experience at higher education in our early 20s, especially in a country like mine where you incur significant amounts of debt for the privilege of doing so. You would need to spread that out over your 70 years. You would have to have a lifelong relationship with education because you're going to change careers so many different times. I mean, we don't know. It'd be facile to try and anticipate the skills needs for the next 70 years, to even anticipate what the jobs will be for the next 70 years. But we know that you're going to have to love learning, and we know that you're going to have to need and want to refresh your skills constantly to remain relevant and current in the labour market. And for me, I would love to see a relationship with universities as these oases of thinking that I can return to periodically to connect with other people and to refresh my thinking through that working life. Not places that I go to as the next stage in my journey into the labour market. Not as places that I go to just to pick up a qualification so that I'll make the sift by employers when they're recruiting for the next graduate post. I would like to see a different vision for education and for university from that. So where does all that take us? Where does it take us if I'm saying we need to think about the way the labour market is changing, the way technology, globalization, and longevity is changing the game for young people that we're educating today? It demands change. Yeah, this is a cliche to show you the Victorian school and a modern classroom. There is some change there, to be fair. You know, they're now in circles, not rows. That's good. You know, I read yesterday that the 21st century is a century of circles, and the 20th century is a century of lines. I've no idea what that means, but I quite liked it. The notion that we might be talking to each other in classrooms as learners is a good thing. And it implies the teacher is not lecturing all the time, and we've moved on from the didactic pedagogy. So, of course, we should acknowledge the progress that we see. But is that uniformed, as we have in my country, some use of technology, quite a lot of paper, in a school? Is that still the best way to prepare people for the future that I have described for you, if we want a utopian future? Because in the end, I do want to just say, we have to design away the dystopian future of technology taking all our jobs. You know, our mission as educators is the utopian future. So let's challenge ourselves as to what that's going to look like. And let's challenge ourselves around universities. Are they... yeah, I went to Cambridge. Oh, good, I didn't really want that slide anyway, but I'll go back to it. I went to Cambridge University. How relevant is that? How relevant is it at a time when graduates are as likely to end up being baristas as they are barristers? Our levels of graduate unemployment are too high. So you leave university with a £20,000, £30,000 debt, and you're not, you know, the professions aren't there. Sophia is starting to get work as a lawyer. It's the creativity, it's the empathy, it's the humanity that will be premium. Andreas Schleicher, the head of the OECD, of OECD education, in the talks that he does at the moment, almost invariably begins with a slide which says the things that are easiest to teach are the things that are easiest to automate. And I think that's true. The question is, what's the best environment for that coffee shop? And so, I mean, maybe I could ask you, just to give me a pause, and you can see whether you can make sense of any of those four images while I ask you, but what is the point of schooling? Does anyone have any thoughts? When did you last ask yourself what the point of school was? I asked an 18-year-old this week. She gave me some good answers, but have you any answers? Yes. Let me come up to you.
I think the point is to cope with life.
To cope with life?
Yeah.
Good.
And to be able to love life, to enjoy life.
Great. To cope with life and enjoy life. And that's one of the answers that Emily, the 18-year-old, gave to me. Any other thoughts? Over there. Right. I'll come over to you over there, because I quite like running around, and it annoys the cameraman. Oh, there we go.
Just one word, wisdom.
Two?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. Yes. Wisdom and?
Interact with other human beings.
Interact with other human beings. Thank you. In the end, obviously I agree with both of those. I'm not going to say that the point of school is not about wisdom. In the end, wisdom is what it's all about. But that interaction with other human beings, I think, is key. And what Emily said, the first thing she said to me was, so that I could, to be social, to learn the social skills of being human. and that's what is going to be valuable for me in my future. And that's indeed what the reason why I picked that picture. I picked this sort of slightly ridiculous picture of the toddler lifting weights as to some extent representing the life struggle and the skills for life. And that's about resilience. That's about stickability, knowing that perseverance pays. To some extent, it's Carol Dweck's growth mindset. I think that's really important. And then wisdom in this century, I summarize with that ridiculous picture of the mobile phone as being about the ability. I think this century, and for all of us now, we're about our ability to channel content. Knowledge has a much shorter life than it used to because it's refreshing itself so much and people are creating so much knowledge all the time. All we can hope to do, I think, is to equip people with enough of the basic concepts and a framework of knowledge and understanding so that they can channel content well and make sense of it and interpret it to be able to channel content. So if we can get those three things right, I think we're equipping young people really well. And then I put the badges in because when I was schools minister, I didn't have that many buttons to press to make things happen if I wanted them to. And we used accountability really clumsily, and I regret quite a lot of that. Forcing young, this week in my country we have a whole issue around standard attainment tests at 11 and the amount of stress that's causing 11-year-olds. And really it's not about their accountability at all. It's not about telling them anything because teachers tell them how they're doing. It's about holding schools to account for the public money that they're spending. And of course, schools need to be accountable for that. But it's not working well, and it's a very clumsy system. But it was clear to me as schools minister that assessment and qualification has become the tail that wags the dog in education. So the other thing I'm interested in when I'm thinking about the point of school is it shouldn't be to get qualifications. Qualifications assessment is a fundamental part of teaching, it's a fundamental part of learning, is to know how you're doing, to know where your gaps are, to know where you need to work harder, to try harder so you can redraft and get better and so on. But we have the technology now. If we embed the use of technology across everything that we're doing in schools, as I think we should, we have the ability to collect e-portfolios of work, that people can click on a badge, as they can with digital badges, and see what you've done to earn that badge. They can delve into your portfolio. They can see your performance. They can see how hard you work. They can see your finished product. You can also have more trust in assessors. I'm a big fan of the music and drama and dance exam, where you have a more subjective judgment by a skilled assessor who looks at performance and says, yeah, that person is performing at that level. And it's not about the formula of how to pass a test, which is, to an extent, the trap that we've got into in my country. So I think there's a lot that we can do around a much more flexible approach to recognizing performance, which is what badging can do. So I'm thinking about what that school might become as we go forward. And I'm thinking that, one of the things I'm proudest of, I'm proud of a few things that I managed to achieve as a schools minister. I did a lot with technology, a lot with developing home access to technology, which managed to get 500,000 children who are offline, online at home so that they could use it for learning. But I'm also very proud of the fact that I finally managed to get the law changed after 100 years of trying, not by me solely, to raise the education leaving age to 18 in my country, but we still have this ridiculous punctuation mark of public examinations at 16. And I would like to break it at 14 and say, actually, I think there's a case for core skills, a curriculum, if you like, up to 14, that puts language skills and numeracy, the traditional core elements of a curriculum, still in there. They're still really, really important. But the creative skills, the digital skills, including coding, which we now have in our national curriculum in the UK, but the emotional and the collaborative ones too. For this labour market of the future, you're not well equipped if you do not have the empathy skills, if you don't have the humanity skills to compete with Sophia. And one of the crimes that's going on in my country's education system right now is the narrowing out of art, music, dance, drama, of the creative subjects in our curriculum because we've become infatuated with the academic subjects. And that's doing a massive disservice for the future of our children. So I would have a spine there of those 6 things, and then we can build the subjects, if you like, around that. But then, 14 to 19, I would be interested in a much more applied learning experience for our young people. I've grabbed 3 screenshots there, all from Palo Alto High School, which you may recognize is in California, in Silicon Valley. So, therefore, it's probably not typical. But it's a publicly funded school, and there is a journalism teacher there called Esther Wojcicki, who is a friend of mine, who has been teaching journalism for 27 years in a high school with 3,000 pupils, and 600 pupils of the 3,000 take her journalism class. It's very popular. And this is some of the output of her journalism class. I met the young man who showed me around the faculty, which has just been built. They used to work out of temporary classrooms for the first 25 years, but 2 years ago they built her a wonderful media school with a TV studio and a radio studio and so on. They produce a regular newspaper. They produce a photographic magazine, they produce an arts magazine, they produce a sports publication. So I was shown around by the guy whose hand that is, but who also happened to edit their foreign affairs publication and was on the editorial board of the newspaper. And those 600 kids aren't all going to be journalists. Yeah. The business model for journalism is a little bit challenged at the moment. I suspect that they will find other things that they're going to do. But what they were all learning were how to work together, how to channel content and to communicate it well across a range of different media, how to research, how to lead. They were learning the skills that we need young people to have through journalism. And indeed, when I met Esther for the first time, she was in London, and I bought her lunch in the House of Lords, and I said, "You're a high school teacher. What's happening in your class while you're in London?" And she said, "Oh, don't worry. They'll be learning, because they really enjoy it, so they'll just turn up and carry on without me. I don't really need to be there." And in any case, if I'm worried about it, I can just log in to my robot, and the robot will go around the class and look, and then I can see what they're doing. And so when I visited the class, I met the robot, which sits in the corner in the stocking station, and then it comes out when she directs it to, and literally goes around, it's just on wheels, goes around the class, and then arrives and looks at what the young people are doing, and then if Esther wants to say something, her face appears in this screen and alarms the hell out of them, and she'll talk to them. I'm not proposing that as a model for teaching, but I am saying those kids were so on task that the teaching was an absolute joy for all members of that faculty, because the kids just wanted to do it. They wanted to be there. They were learning, and they were loving it. And that's what I want that 14 to 19 phase to be. So that then we offer that. Because in the end, that is the future for us all. The future is of us always learning. I've crossed the barrier of 50, looking forward to the next 50 years. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being out and about in wonderful environments like you have here in Norway, but being able to learn all the time about what I'm seeing, even if I need a magnifying glass to look at my device to find out what Wikipedia has got to tell me. I hope you've found that interesting, and I look forward to having some chat and discussion with you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have 15 minutes for questions or comments, and please, when you get the microphone, introduce yourself.
That's it. All done. Does anyone agree? All right, okay. Someone's gone up there, which was a long way to get to there, so you must have seen somebody else. So there's a gentleman up there, and then if you want to take the microphone up to the lady there, halfway up, that's great.
My question refers to a school system that you described that works for 80 to 90% of kids. So what is your vision for the 10, 15, 20% who, for some reason or another, don't get to participate in this future?
I'm trying to interpret your question, which isn't me trying to be a politician, honestly. It's trying to understand where you're coming from with it. So just tell me who that, be blunt with me about who that 10% are.
Well, I work in the lower high school system, and we have students who aren't able socially, physically.
So it's because of
mentally.
special educational need rather than social exclusion or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly that.
Okay. I think one of the excitements that I have about this utopian future that I'm advocating for is the end of average, is the opportunity for us to really properly relate to people as individuals. And if we're moving away from an education system that is driven by qualification, that is driven by grades, that's driven by sifting people in so that they can then go through into university and through into employment on the basis of a sifting system, rather than people being able to properly interrogate them as individuals, then there's a lot we have to learn from those who work in the special educational needs sector, because that's what they already do. And then we can apply, and we can to some extent level the playing field for that 10%, because they can be part of the 100%, if that makes sense, if that's not too trite. Everybody has different educational needs because we are all individuals. Some have more extreme, and they're your 10%. But I think that there is the opportunity for us genuinely to relate to people as individuals, because if I look at something like LinkedIn and where that technology will in the end go, I think the CV is almost over, and that we will start to have data feeds of us, of everything that we've done, pretty much, that employers will get temporary rights to look at, that we will grant them, so that they can see whether or not they want to employ us. And they will be looking at us as individuals, not on the basis of our grades, not on the basis of our university, but on the basis of who we are. And that's how we will need to educate people.
Hello, my name is Marianne. I'm from People You Know, and you're going to hear more about that earlier. Just during last night, I made a Facebook page for those who want to look at that. But I think it's really, really interesting what you have been talking about today. I believe social skills and empathy is the thing that the world needs, more than skills in math, Norwegian, history, or any of all of the other subjects together.
Yeah.
I have many questions, but I'm wondering how can we make a school that emphasizes on this, but also at the same time make us possible to live in this world, to make a living, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question. And I agree with you. I mean, I think, as I showed in that slide, the subjects, there's a place for the subjects. If we're going to educate people to channel content, then they do need to be confident with a bunch of competencies, skills, and knowledge as a framework of understanding stuff. But the empathy is really key. I would point you to a school. There's an example of a school in East London called School 21, which is very close to West Ham, another Premiership football club, who played their last game on Tuesday night in their old stadium, Berlin Park, Upton Park. So around the corner from Upton Park is School 21, which was founded by someone I knew from the world of politics, actually. And what Peter Hyman has done is he has put oral skills, at the heart of what that school does. So, and drafting, actually, is the other thing that I really like about what School 21 does. So, when you go in to the school, you will see self-portraits of the pupils, but you won't see a self-portrait. You will see the drafts of self-portraits through the year, because they have an ethos that celebrates improvement and that celebrates going back to work, not do work, have it graded, put it away. It's do work, look at it, assess it, improve it. But they are constantly presenting. If you went to an assembly, as they have every day, you won't hear teachers speaking. You will be listening, and everyone will be listening to pupils talking. Every pupil has to stand up in front of the whole school at various times and talk. And so they've embedded oral C in what they do in a really brilliant way, because Peter believes that that's a fundamental skill, because it's an empathetic skill for the labour market. You want to come back?
I just wanted to comment on that, because I agree with you. The ability to talk and to reflect is really important, but also I think we have to consider that humans are very different, and some are extrovert, love to hold the microphone.
Yeah.
Other people are introvert and might still have fantastic ideas, fantastic skills. So I think the school needs to consider that and make it possible for everybody to contribute.
I think that's a point very, very well made. There is a danger that we are living in an extrovert's world, and that we don't, there's lots to value about the more reflective, more introverted personalities. And there are now, through the different media, so many different ways that we can express ourselves and perform. And as long as we can offer people those opportunities too, and celebrate those, then I think that's a great thing. I don't think it undermines the importance of oral C, because I think even for those introverts, to sensitively build their confidence so that they can speak is a hugely important thing if you can pull it off. But accepting that they're different.
We have one more here.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm working in teacher training, and thank you for a very excellent sort of introduction to where we're going. And my question is, where do we go from these sort of individuals or individual schools who actually manage to make a change to a massive change? I mean, how much can politicians do, educators do, how do we do it?
Another great question. Tough. Having been at the top-down end of things, very few things that I did survive, because the government's changed and they've changed them with their mandate, or because of the not invented here syndrome. So I've become a strong believer in bottom-up as being the more sustainable, as long as the government, as long as the politicians will get out the way. And so there's a case for challenging politicians, as I think more on the basis of getting out the way and saying, yeah, there are things that obviously politicians need to do. They are responsible for raising tax and spending it. And so they are going to be interested in how the money is spent, and that the money is spent well. And we just have to be realistic that that's just always going to be true. But I don't see why politicians should be interested in the curriculum. I don't see why they should be interested in textbooks. They should be really interested in ensuring that there are enough great teachers for every child in every community. But they shouldn't be interested, but it's for other people to work out how to do that. People like yourself, obviously. And so there's the thing for defining what politics does, and then there's how do you create the bottom-up change. And there, I think, there ought to be opportunities, because we live in the most connected age of human history, where I've got whatever I've got, 12,000 followers on my Twitter account. They don't read every tweet, of course they don't. But the ability to connect with people is so profound. We ought to be able to create movement, and some people manage to do that. And it might be ignited by a great TED Talk, it might be ignited by a great campaign that captures people's imaginations. One of the things I'm working with Esther from Palo Alto on is a notion of 20% problem-based learning time in schools. And just saying, look, here's a really modest ask. We know that the system wants us to do maths and science and English and so on and so forth. And do it as subjects with subject specialists, and that's the accepted way of doing that best. But please, can we just say 20% of time is for problem-based learning, so that we can start to create that environment that we've all been talking about. And begin in that relatively small way. And a few schools I know do that already. And then build from there, maybe. But campaigns nationally, locally, internationally, around achievable things is the way forward.
Hello.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Ladies first. I work in teachers' education. I was wondering about the list of core skills.
Yeah.
I missed the word literacy.
Yeah, I took out literacy and put in language as literacy, if you like, because I thought, at one stage, I thought I could do literacy, and then spinning off that digital, language, emotional, because to some extent, literacy is bigger than language, but I thought it would be more specific and more articulate to just specify language literacy, which is led by your first language. The ability to read and write in your first language, absolutely core. But then it spills into other languages too, kind of obviously. Not obviously in my country, really obviously in yours, where you're so good at understanding my English, for which I'm grateful.
Okay, thank you for a very interesting speech. I was going to ask you a little bit more as a politician with regards to the issue of lifelong learning.
Yeah.
You say it's very important, and I heard people say that, but still it's sort of, seems to me it's kept in as a kind of thing that old people would do in their leisure time. So should there be, if it is really necessary, to what degree should authorities make a system similar to how kids go to school? You know, to what degree is that something that we as a community should take care of, and you know, that everyone should have a right to, and yeah. So on?
I think we need to think really carefully about that. I think if we moved away from a sort of conveyor belt education system that goes sort of childhood, bit of a sift, advanced learning, bit of a sift, university, and then work, or school, vocational training, work, and said, actually, I'd love it if the destination for everyone leaving high school, if you like, was work. And then everyone did some vocational training and use that time to reflect on what they really wanted to study at university, if that's what they wanted to do. You know, it's a very expensive mistake when you choose the wrong course in my country. But people do it all the time, and they can't really afford to go back. But if you ended up in a system where you left school, and essentially, let's say you had 5 years credit in higher education or vocational education, but it was credit in learning that you could draw on at any time. That's not much. But 5 years credit as a taxpayer that you get to be able to go and access learning at whatever level, because it's what you need to enrich yourself, be it materially or intellectually or spiritually or whatever, then that would be a start in changing the culture and saying, we've got to keep learning. We've got to keep reskilling and refreshing. We know that MOOCs are successful, but pretty much only accessed by people who are already graduates, so they're not the great democratization of learning that we all hoped they would be. But online learning gives us opportunities to do quite a lot of learning in our spare time. We know that libraries are struggling because books are less relevant to a lot of people's reading than they used to be. But can we invent libraries as the places of lifelong learning that they were when they were libraries, when books were the way that you access learning? So they're places you go to access learning. You know, there are opportunities for us to embed in community institutions and opportunities for people, online and offline, to learn from each other. You know, the biggest, you know, if we were going to have school as a platform, then that platform would take away some of the irritating things, the way that Zipcar or whatever takes away some of the irritating things of car sharing, to do with insurance and so on. The platform would take away the irritants and just make it easy to connect teachers and learners. And often those teachers would be other learners, especially in the adult world. And we can broker that and create a learning culture that would be very successful, I think, in to some extent we see in the coding world. You know, because demand for coding skills is rapidly changing all the time, there's a very good culture through GitHub and through other platforms of coders learning from each other and sharing each other's knowledge in an open way. And we need that culture to extend across a bunch of other sectors. But in the end, you know, as a teacher, the definition, one of the core elements of professionalism is learning from each other. And in that new labour market, with the hollowed out middle, where we want everyone essentially to be professionals, they've all got to be learning from each other.
I'm afraid we're running out of time. I will allow one quick question.
Yeah, you have to allow me one quick question. My name is Lynn Holvik. I'm a principal of a huge high school. And for years now, we've been talking about being connected, collaboration, metacognition, everything. And yet, the final exams and the testing regimes undermines everything we do. If you really mean as politicians that you want to change the education system, why Why don't you change the exam? We asked the question in OECD a couple of years ago, and they said, well, why don't you change the exams?
Yeah.
It undermines everything you're talking about.
Yeah. I think we massively need to change the way we do assessment. I mean, there's a modest thing we could do, which is just allow the internet into the exam hall. Even just that means that the questions would test thinking rather than recall.
But why don't you do anything about it?
Well,
we know, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But no one is doing anything.
The reason why politicians don't, I mean, if I was back in office, God forbid, then I would. And I would, once politically I'd worked out how to get through the conundrum, which is this. Politicians and the people who comment on politics and inform the electorate who give politicians their jobs all do really well out of education. They don't get to be journalists and politicians unless they've been really successful with the status quo and the current paradigm. So they really, really struggle. And actually their kids are doing really well out of the current paradigm too. So they really struggle to understand why we should change it. Because for them it works.
But you're a Labour politician.
I am. And I'm, I can repent for my sins in office and say, I am sorry that it's taken leaving office to reflect and gather the wisdom to start to understand things differently. I think the other thing that might drive change and might force even right-wing, not let alone progressive politicians to change will be the competitive advantage, which ironically is being achieved by Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, by less democratic countries, where they are seeing these trends and anticipating them and starting to design in some of these things. Now, they're not yet taking away the tests, but they are designing in some of the problem-based collaborative learning that we've been talking about for all of these years. So maybe it'll be competitive pressure that forces the change. But the reality is there is a political establishment that really struggles with this. And it's back to the question we had earlier about how do we make this change? We need to make it as movements of professionals saying, we can't put up with this, allying with parents who in the end are the voters, and saying to parents, there are a few wonderful examples of letters home from head teachers with test scores saying, these are the results of your child's test.
En grunnleggende forståelse av noen av disse mekanismene. Så det har økt i relevans, tenker jeg. Sammen med disse andre argumentene som jeg nevnte da. Det var selvfølgelig et marked for programmerere også på 80-tallet. Men jeg hadde vel ikke inntrykk, eller det skal jeg være forsiktig med. Men var det arbeidslivsbehovene som stod i sentrum for det trykket? Det var også jeg husker en diskusjon om type programmering som latin, at du ble flink i andre ting fordi at du også lærte programmering. Det argumentet er fremdeles med oss for all del, i form av type algoritmisk tenking. Er det noe feedback i mikrofonen min? Ja, litt? Ja. Jeg vet ikke om du vil kommentere ytterligere på det? Ja.
Nei, begrunnelsen var jo at dette var veldig verdifullt også på 80-tallet. Ja. Og arbeidslivet var også inne der. Men det var jo veldig bestemt når man tok det bort. Jeg ser at samfunnet har endret seg i dag, men jeg er usikker på om behovet for grunnleggende programmeringskunnskap er til stede. Sånn som nå begeistringens brøl. Jeg har hørt det før.
Ja, jeg vil takke salen for gode innspill. Konklusjonen min er at fremtiden forandrer seg. Og så får vi nye spørsmål. Og så takker jeg for veldig gode perspektiv på hvordan vi kan fortsette å stille hverandre gode spørsmål videre. Kanskje spørsmålet ser likedan ut, og så dukker svarene opp igjen på nye måter, ikke sant? Tusen takk.
Tusen takk.
Yeah. Okay. Hallo, hallo. Stille. Okay. Then I would like to welcome everybody to a session with George Siemens, a person that NKUL for many years has tried to get a hold of. My name is Gunnar Østgaard, and a lot of my work and a lot of the programming I've been done the last couple of years has been inspired, in fact, by the connectivism theory of George Siemens. So it's a great honor for me to actually to have the opportunity now to spend a couple of minutes just giving some light introduction of who I believe he is. Has things changed since the year 1233? If you read the George Siemens, some of what he is talking about is that, yes, there is some disruption going on in school and in the education system. But however, most of the technologies that we are bringing into school is reinforcing the existing paradigm. It's not opening up enough, probably. So yes, a lot of things have changed, but maybe not as much as some of us expected. George Siemens, you have been in Norway before. And unfortunately, that was in Bergen. And you've been other places also, I think, I've seen. What do we know about George Siemens? Well, we know that he written a lot about learning analytics. And I am working in a company called Connexus, which actually is delivering Pulse to some of you guys here, especially the fylkene. And in fact, we have experienced situations where we see that schools, for instance, if you look at the ranking for 2 weeks ago, the national ranking of the high schools, where we are really looking down. We think that kind of usage of learning analytics is maybe building up to George Orwell's worst dreams. This is Siemens, a book or two, a couple of blogs. In Norwegian, I don't repeat it, it's written in the program too. He's got the connectivism theory, of course. In addition, the duplication with limited cost, which tells that it's actually the relation between learner and the teacher, or the learner and learner that matter. Why do I love so many Canadians? Everywhere where I go to conferences, the Nachspiels is always filled with the Canadians. And here are some of them. Andy Hargraves, we are working quite a lot with. Michael Nilsen up there. Neil Young saved me through my youth here in Trondheim for some years ago. That's a long time ago. Okay, learning analytics. It's as easy as this. Well-being is the best correlation we can see in Pulse in terms of good achievements. And it shouldn't be necessary to say it. Think about that. Actually, child or student well-being is crucial. Okay, this is a product that we have developed using the principles of connectivism. We are working with an app in Bangladesh, bringing learning to poor people on the streets in Dhaka, using a mobile app. In addition, same as we do in Myanmar. Same principles. Okay, let me just run through this very fast. The average intensity, the learning intensity on society. Again, Real Miller, a Canadian, saying that everything is increasing except know what. Know who is the most important thing, and know why then I do something I shouldn't have done. I hope nobody does this to me when I'm giving a speech. Is going through my Twitter blog. Okay. This was quite high up on, I think it was on your favorite, George. There are humans everywhere, even in war zones. Philosophy makes kids smarter. Some humor, it's a bit nerdy. The four-year model of NTNU should be abolished, maybe, in the future. It's lifelong learning that you should stick with. He come in here with Fly Norwegian, and he's, as a Canadian, he's throwing a bit shit on the Americans, as we do with the Swedes. So there was the Wi-Fi, good. Conservatives now, but everything else. June Breivik is a friend of me. You probably heard her several times from BI. I think I don't need to comment this. It's the next president of USA. Yeah, they cannot take this. Okay. Erik Solheim was quite high on his blog. Poverty is going down. There are things going the right direction in the world. Poverty is dramatically going down. But sea is rising. And finally, I asked George this morning, what is he going to talk about or worrying about? And you said the rise of China or rise of Asia, and what we can learn from that. So we look forward to 55 minutes with George. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks very much. I think I have to turn this on. These little additional steps. There we go. And I'll just return the phone to Gunnar so he can tweet and check email during the talk. Okay, so if any of you are interested, I have my slides posted on SlideShare if you want to download those in advance or even during. A lot of my footnotes and citations are listed there, so you might find that to be of interest as well, and you can just find them here. First, I want to say a particular thank you to the program committees and the organizers for the opportunity to spend some time with you. I was in Barcelona yesterday delivering a talk, and when I arrived here, it was actually warmer here in Trondheim than it was in Barcelona when I left, so that was a treat as well. I want to look at what I think is important for us to understand about the future of education. And it's one that really links to a quality of life, and one that also looks at the idea of meaningful or gainful or valuable employment, rather than just something that's focused on a specific narrow definition of what it means to learn and what learning is all about. And in terms of the focus of the talk today, then, in order to get to that idea of learning that is a quality of life issue rather than learning that is only work-based, I'm going to go through a few specific topic areas today. I want to spend, actually, I say a bit of context, but it's probably about a third of the talk is focused on context, to just give you the background landscape and what the research questions are that I'm currently looking at. I spend a good portion of my time in higher education research. We, through Link Research Lab, have a growing focus on what's happening in the K-12 sector, so I'll address most of my talk primarily from K-12. I had a good chat this morning with Andreas and with Gunnar about the type of audience that's here and the focus that exists, so I had a quick panic moment spending 30 minutes updating my slides to make sure that it was hopefully relevant. After talking about context, I'll look at the growing influence of digital technologies. It's something that I think we're all familiar with, so I'll move through the digital context, the data-focused context fairly quickly, and then I'll spend a little more time talking about the distributed aspect of learning and also what our future might look like. I'll move through these slides quickly, leave about 10 minutes for questions. So first, a little bit of context. Through Link Research Lab at University of Texas at Arlington, I have a primary focus for the lab, which is what does it mean to be human in a digital age? That's really my my guiding or driving question, because we're seeing a lot of development with technologies and new approaches to teaching and learning, and somewhere in the process we're talking so much about the change aspect that we're not spending enough time looking at what is it that we're becoming. What does it mean to be a human in today's era, rather than just being having a fetished focus on all of the things that are changing societally. So that's my driving question, is what does it mean to be human in a digital age? And I'm looking at that from 4 specific research areas, and I'll talk a little bit about links so you understand my background or my context. First, we're looking at how is knowledge created and how is it shared when we're involved with digital mobile technologies. Secondly, we're looking at how are we going to work in the future. I'm sure most of you have heard a lot of the reports that have come out over the last several years that identify that work is being automated, and we could see a rise in massive amounts of unemployment as technology is now entering a stage of job destruction rather than job creation. The third aspect is one that I'm personally very interested in because of my own background as a first-in-family degree completer, but it's this idea of success for all students. Our success as a society is going to be more based on whether we bring the bottom poverty quartile of society into education, rather than the success of society based on just doing a better job of educating the top quartile of society. And then finally, I have a lot of interest in what the future of learning will be like. How are we going to learn in universities, in work, in K-12, and so on. Now, to give you a little bit of background on how this comes out in my own research interest, these are a few projects that we're involved with Link currently. One of the first ones we're quite actively engaged in is the Digital Learning Research Network. It's a project that involves a number of R1 top-level universities in the US, so systems like Stanford, Columbia, and others, as well as a number of state systems, where we're really looking at how are digital technologies and networks influencing how we learn, and perhaps more importantly, how do the research projects that we engage in our labs actually cash out into practice? What's the practical impact of research that we're doing? We're also very involved in this idea of a smart science network, which is educators and faculty sharing content that they've developed, but also their pedagogical approaches, and really trying to take advantage of the network effects. There are certain things that we do over and over again in all of our schools and classrooms and universities that if we take advantage of the distributed network that this happens within, we can reduce some of the areas of overlap so that we can spend more time in one-to-one interaction with our learners. We're also quite interested in what do we understand about language through discourse? How can we understand how people connect and interact with one another while they're in a learning process, and can we extract awareness of learner development of knowledge and conceptual development through that process? Additionally, we're currently in this, I believe, is the first National Science Foundation Big Data in Education grant that we were awarded at the start of January, and we're looking at the effects that different systems have on how people collaborate. So our focus, we're looking at 3 systems of learning. We're looking at Wikipedia, where there's a knowledge building activity as individuals create shared documents. We're looking at Stack Overflow as a way to understand how people in these digital environments help one another solve personal problems around programming challenges often. And then the third area that we're looking at are open online courses, or MOOCs as they're sometimes called. It's a multi-year grant where our intent is to understand what are the structural attributes of a digital space and how do those influence knowledge development activity. I'm still fairly involved in the idea of MOOCs, where we're looking at different pathways. How do we move from one approach to learning to another approach to learning? And if we have 300, 400, 500 people in a room, the reality is everyone starts at a different knowledge point and needs a different level of instruction. More recently, and I'll spend more time addressing this in a few slides,